Yo, what's up? So in today's day and age, we are constantly exposed to all kinds of advertisement, and it does sometimes feel like it is necessary to always have the latest and greatest in terms of gear. And speaking from my own experience, I've certainly felt that hunger to acquire a new piece of kit quite frequently. But do you really have to always get the latest and greatest? Or can you actually have fun with something that is old and dirt cheap? Well, I recently stumbled across some of the photos that I shot over 6 years ago in South Africa, and I was surprised to find out that I took all of these on the Sony RX100 Mark I. This little guy. I bought this camera back in the day mainly for vlogging, and I used my Canon 70D back in those days for all kinds of photography, and I don't even remember taking a lot of photos with this little guy. But after looking at those old photos, I kind of wondered. And so last weekend I decided to take this little guy out for a hike, which I was planning to go on anyway, to find out if something like this might actually be all you really need for your everyday photography needs. So welcome to today's video in this glorious, cloudy, moody weather here in beautiful old Germany. And today we are talking about the Sony RX100 Mark I. So this camera has been released back in 2012, I think, but I bought this particular model in 2015, back when I think the Mark III was already out. And the reason why I bought the Mark I was simply because I could not afford the Mark III. Back in 2012, when this guy was first released, it was apparently sold for about 650 euros. And when I bought mine in 2015, I bought it for around 300 to 350 euros. And to be completely honest, back then I was still a university student and I could barely afford this camera, let alone the newer Mark III model, which was also about 600 to 700 euros at the time, if I remember correctly. But anyway, I mainly bought this camera as sort of a vlogging or on-the-go video camera, because back then my smartphone camera certainly didn't cut it. And while I did also have a Canon 70D with a couple of lenses back in the day, I simply wasn't in the mood to schlep around that camera to film everyday situations all of the time. So this camera was actually quite good for that. By today's standards though, the video quality is absolutely atrocious. But with that being said, I recently went through a couple of the photos that I took back in the day, around 2016 on a holiday in South Africa, Cape Town. And among the photos of the Canon 70D, there was one photo in particular that caught my eye. And at first I actually thought that this was also shot with the Canon 70D, and I wanted to look up which lens I used and which settings, etc. And as it turned out, this was actually taken with the Sony RX100 Mark I. It started out live as a RAW file and I edited it and I completely forgot about it. But that photo was actually quite nice in my opinion. So what I want to try out today is if this camera might actually make for a decent photography camera, even by today's standards. Now this camera comes with a 1-inch sensor, which is fairly small, but it is paired with decent Zeiss optics, which give you the equivalent of a 28 to about a 100 mm focal range, and it starts out at f1.8 at 28 mm, but then it slows down fairly quickly to f4.9 at the long end. This is a full metal, probably aluminium body, and it just feels so much nicer than its modern counterpart, the Sony ZV-1, and it is also quite a bit slimmer and overall smaller than that camera. And also it turns on faster, and more importantly it also shuts down a good bit faster, and that actually makes this camera as an overall package quite a bit more handy, if you ask me, as sort of an everyday camera which you can just put into your jacket pocket. It pretty much disappears. You can barely see that I got this camera on me. You take it out, you turn it on, it's ready to go in an instant, and then if you want to put it away again, you just press this button and it retracts immediately, put it back in your pocket, and off you go. So if the image quality actually holds up by today's standards, which it very well could, it does have that 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor and it shoots RAW, and if it does all of that, it might actually make for a very decent buy even in 2023, and I've looked it up. You can get this camera on eBay today for about 28 to 30 euros, and that might be the bargain of the century. So with all of that being said, my mission today is to take a couple of nice or decent landscape images with this camera. I also do, of course, have a couple of other cameras with me, as you do. I do actually have a little add-on for this camera as well, and that is this magnetic adapter, I hope you can see that, which just pops onto the front element of the lens. And on that I do have a polarizer. Back in the day I just used this for a variable ND filter, because again I use this for video primarily. Not today though. And so if we turn this camera on, let's just hide my face here real quick. You can just put that on and there you go. So let's just see if we can get a bit of the glare out of the image. I'm excited to see how these images will turn out. Bloop. So nice, so useful. And look at how slim that is. That's incredible. I hope you can hear me with all of that wind. But this might actually make for a nice-ish composition. Let's give it a quick test shot. Alright. And let's put that bad boy on there real quick to avoid a bit of that glare. We are at f5.6. Oh god, I hope you can see that. Let's zoom in a bit. Sadly, you do only get a magnification counter, so that is 1.6 times 28 mil, I guess. But I'm not good at math, so I probably just have to wing it. So, at least on the screen, that looks, well, alright, I guess. I mean, it's not the image of the year. Yeah, completely forgot about that. You do get that wicked front element wheel, this guy, which looks a bit like a zoom ring or a focusing ring. And you can also use that for focusing, but I set it to ISO, so I can switch my ISO on the fly. Let's go with that. 1/100th of a second. That should be stable enough. Alright, let's continue with the hike. Bit closer, just a bit. Gotta make the most out of those 100 mil. Okay, that should do the trick. Okay, so we had a couple of failed attempts today, but maybe the time has finally come to get an image that also does have a subject. Wouldn't that be nice? So let's see. I don't know, you can probably not see that on camera, but, and the magic's almost gone. But there was, for just about a second, a bit of sunlight that hit those tree stems, which looked quite nice. Also, if we look the other direction, there's that hunting, whatever it's called. Whoa, I don't know if you can see that, but there's quite a bit of storm damage and devastation going on over yonder. That looks, well, terrible. Morbid aesthetics. But anyway, I'm getting kind of tired and hungry, so no more filming. I'm just going to make my way back home. I got about 2 kilometers or so to get back to the car, and I see you again when I had a chance to take a look at the images that I shot today and maybe also tweak some of them in Lightroom. So, till then. Okay, so this was clearly not the best day in terms of photography, but at the very least, all things considered, I think I got a few images that I kind of liked. Not portfolio shots by any means, but at least something, I guess. More importantly though, I genuinely had a lot of fun using this little camera as my only camera on this hike. Because with its size and weight, this camera can actually make sense as a pocket camera. You know, a lot of people talk about how they use something like the Fuji X100V as a pocket camera, and I've owned that camera for over 2 years, and I've never done that simply because, in my opinion, cameras like the Fuji X100V are still way too big to put into your jacket's pocket. Something like this, though, is in a completely different league in terms of its size and weight. Also, the fact that you can even use a polarizer and shoot raw and have all the manual controls with a camera like this is just a nice bonus. And most importantly, you really don't have to care if you lose or break this camera, because you can always replace this for little to no money. So with all that being said, will this camera replace my Leica Q2 as my travel photography camera going forward? Certainly not. While a 1-inch sensor is big for a point-and-shoot camera, the images really didn't have anywhere near the kind of detail, clarity and all that compared to what I'm used to from my Leica Q2 or my Sony a7 IV or even my Fuji cameras. Especially once you start working with the images in Lightroom, you very quickly discover that there is very limited flexibility before you run out of data to push your images further. Also, with the overall look of the images, I honestly don't know what exactly I mean by that, but something about these images just looks like old technology to me. And I say that not necessarily as a negative, because in my opinion, I think that this also adds a bit of character to the images that you get out of this camera. So in conclusion, while this is a very neat little shooter, I'm not going to go out and sell all of my high-end camera gear. But with that being said, what I will do is use this camera as my new everyday carry camera going forward. At least on those days where I'm not doing anything special, I'm just going to work and back, and I'm not expecting any great photo opportunities, but I still want to have something with me that doesn't get in the way, that I do not have to worry about, and that does give me the ability to shoot fairly decent quality images if the need arises. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you have any older cameras laying around, I would highly recommend you to just take them for a spin. At the very least, it is a ton of fun in my opinion. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you all a great rest of the week. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.